Yeah, I love that because that's real important. The control guy or the EMS people setting this up, if they do it right, it makes service technicians' jobs so much easier when they're on call because you can be notified exactly what it is so you can go and pinpoint what you're looking for instead of just, oh, we got an alarm on the rack, just come in and check it out. So that's pretty cool. Welcome to CO2 Mondays, another Refrigeration Mentor podcast. I'm your host, Charles Matthews. And once again, I want to thank everyone for taking the time on their Mondays to come and hang out to talk about CO2. As you know, CO2 is growing in popularity. That's why you guys show up each week. And I really appreciate you taking the time. And for those of you listening on the podcast, thank you so much for all the reviews, sharing on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. I really appreciate that. That really helps other people find this information on CO2. So thank you so much. Today, I got a special guest, a good friend of mine. I actually met probably over 10 years ago now. We worked at the same company a long time ago, and we met actually in a mechanical room for the first time. And then over the years, we built a relationship, stayed in contact, and now he's the technical manager for control platforms. He'll explain his role, but he's an expert at controls, different platforms, and he's we got a great conversation today on the CO2 E3 platform. Ryan, welcome to CO2 Mondays. How you doing?
Not too bad, not too bad. Thanks for having me.
Ryan, why don't you introduce yourself to those who don't know you and give them a little bit about your background?
My name's Ryan McAndrews. I am a manager of controls and energy for Emerson Canada. I've been in the trade since, like officially since like 2005, but I kind of always grew up with it. I've been lucky enough where my dad was an HVAC, refrigeration, ammonia, chiller, boiler, pneumatics guy, so I always had that expertise at home or dinner talk. But yeah, I started doing controls for an OEM when I started my apprenticeship. But I tried different aspects of the trade of large HVAC, large refrigeration. Spent quite a bit of time in supermarkets, where it seems to always feel like home. And kind of found a niche into the control aspect of it. And I guess here I am today.
Yeah, because when we first met, actually, Ryan was doing the controls on it was a microthermal platform at that time. I'm pretty sure it was a Fortino's actually that we met. That was the very first time we met. And then over the years, I just continued to hear about you working on controls, E2s, doing crazy flex combiners, and which leads into a great role that you have now because this is your day job. You must be loving this stuff, playing around with these controls because I know there's so much opportunity and so much more to learn. You know what I mean? You had a high level of controls, but now it's going to take it to the next level working with the manufacturer on the controls, which I really love. So today we're going to be diving into E3, using E3 with CO2. Why don't we give a little bit of background on the new E3 platform and talk about what is coming and what's already out there? Because I've already seen the E3s out there, and I know more and more of them are going to be coming. That's hands down. You see probably a lot more of them going out there now. Why don't we give an introduction to the E3 and what's going on with it for CO2?
Yeah, I guess just a quick little catch up for the E3s. So model numbers are a little different from what everyone's used to with the E2s. You have, RX 100s, 300s, and 400s. Same goes with BX and CX. E3s are a tad different. The equivalent of, let's say, an RX 300 will just be an E3 RX. An E2 RX 400 is the equivalent to an RXE. Same goes rather for the CX and the BX. There is a small format model available, which main difference being there's less applications built into it, and that reflects to the cost into it. There's also a model that's referred to as SR, which is a service replacement model, which that one out of the box will have the most applications built into it. So kind of could be good if your fleet has a lot of E3s and for whatever reason you have an issue. This can kind of get you out of a jam on a weekend instead of looking out to us for requiring additional license if you have like a 400 series or something like that. There's also the site aggregator. Site aggregator model is essentially if you have, let's say, a mechanical room with 3 or 4 racks built into it, the site aggregator networks to those ones, and it's a glorified central hub. And you could have your main alarms come out from your site aggregator as well, so you can narrow down the alarm context and whatnot.
Yeah.
In the future, near future, there will be another model added, which will be a CO2 E3 model. It will have its own part number to it, as well as some of the more unique CO2 applications, being iPro valve controller, CO2 suction control. Down the road, there'll be a couple other features coming out as well. But yeah, also another nice thing with the E3 is it has, I guess, a little more horsepower, you can say, is what you can expect
Yeah.
from your electronics.
Compared to the 250 megs of the E2 or whatever it was, if it even had that much. So
Yeah, exactly. One of my favorite features built into it, well, it's Ethernet. It's and the email alarm notifications is quite a nice feature that you can get into it as well. You can email alarms is a very nice feature to have, and it's being well received. It's nice to have.
yeah, no, exactly. Anytime you run into issues, it's nice to know right away, because sometimes the customer doesn't even know. You know what I mean? I always same with you. You know, you get a call 12 hours after the rack's already been down and product's probably already spoiled, but they call you at 10 o'clock at night, but it's been alarming since 2, and it wasn't like oh, it's not a big deal, right? And now in this way, they can be notified as well as the contractor can be notified at the same time, and then a decision can be made.
Yeah, and even then, regarding the alarms out, you can kind of really fine tune the alarming, how the priority goes out, who gets it, what time frame. So you can filter out the alarm before it even goes out. So if you have a potential of a nuisance, I don't recommend bypassing an alarm, but there's lots of stuff you can do to clean it up,
Yeah, yeah.
most
And,
definitely.
and that makes sense because really want to work with your customer on that. And that's a feature that a lot of people probably don't even use, because I know other platforms that have that feature and nobody uses it, but this is the education that people should know. This is huge for you and your customer because it's going to help save product in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like being, if the contractor receives the alarms at a certain time of day, or end user, or an alarm company, or a third party, you can kind of pick and choose.
Yeah, love it. So that's going to be good. So this new E3 CO2, I'm really excited about that because I know they've been talking about that for years, but I'm sure it's almost ready to be out there. It's almost ready to be launched and get it. Why don't we talk about some of the applications it's in right now for CO2? Because there is some workarounds. I know I talked to some people where you got to get some licenses and add CAN programs and things like that to make it work. Where I'm assuming with the E3 CO2, all these CAN programs will be in there. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. Like the big two being the CO2 suction control, which has quite a few more lines into it. It's not just your typical um suction pressure input, set point, float enable, and whatnot. Um I have a demo that I can show what it is. Mind you, not all the inputs you can imagine are true values, but just to kind of,
Yeah.
I can navigate it, if for those that are able to see, I can kind of explain it as best as I can for
Yeah,
those
let's
that
do it.
aren't able to see anything. Let's let me share that.
I'll do my best to explain for people listening to and on the podcast as well as Ryan will.
All right, is that working?
Yeah.
Okay. For those that have seen an E3 or a site supervisor, the screen will look familiar to them. In this case, this is a virtual application, so there's no true system running behind here. In this case, this is our CO2 suction application. Let's just load her up here. First, our first screen, status screen, is kind of typical what you would see in a standard enhanced suction group. Just basic, the control status, what it's doing, learning, observing, pressure and set point, and how much of the actual PID output is going to be calculated. Dig a little deeper into our inputs, we have liquid injection set point. We can you can set that up for a temperature on it, hot gas injection as well. So get
Awesome.
low load applications that's available to you.
So that's great. So that would be tied into the relay contact for either the hot gas dump or the liquid injection solenoid valve, correct? So at 50 degrees, when it's measuring that temperature, just say um, it will inject liquid refrigerant or vice versa. Is that correct? So that,
Yeah, you can kind of do it two ways. So like I've seen OEMs go both ways with it. Being if it's just doing a relay or some sort of solenoid. We've also had it where it's doing just a glorified enable command, and that enable command is starting a loop sequence that's outputting 0 to 10, which it can then control more of a linear valve or a slow opening valve instead of a solenoid.
awesome. Awesome.
Let's just dive a little next. Output screen, kind of similar in this regards. Just diving into the overall status of the suction group and what's going on. The superheat set points and percentages. Keep in mind the suction pressure or the stages. I only have the one compressor because again, this is kind of simulated. CO2 alarms. This is kind of where we can see a tab that's quite different from what we're accustomed to. We have various alarms that are available to us, and also the alarming and how it's laid out takes a little bit of getting used to. There's a little more details. We have kind of like sub menus available in all of them now. Like for example, let's say high flash tank pressure. We have these green arrows that you'll see throughout Site Manager in the E3. Typically, this green arrow, from what we're accustomed to, is meant for where you can get your input from, being to get it from a boarding point, or if you're getting it from a logic point from another application. In this case, whenever we use the drop-down menu, you can state what category you want that alarm to be in. In this case, refrigeration. You can have a custom message being into it, which that has its benefit for especially on the email alarms out. So if this alarm is configured to email out when it trips, you can have a custom message in there of anything from pressure exceeded XYZ, or
Yeah.
a little note at the end of a little tip, and verify this, verify that.
Yeah, I love that because that's real important. The control guy or the EMS people setting this up, if they do it right, it makes service technicians' jobs so much easier when they're on call because you can be notified exactly what it is so you can go and pinpoint what you're looking for instead of just, oh, we got an alarm on the rack, just come in and check it out. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. Like I don't know, that in my day of doing a lot of startups, I spent a lot of time setting up alarms, verifying the alarms and their priorities. Because mainly from a contractor point of view, if it's set up properly and you get the proper care that gets put into it, you'll eliminate the service calls, or
Yeah.
you'll filter them out more, and it makes for a better project in the end if you have all your alarms set up properly and verified.
Yeah, and I really like that. What I really liked about this already, about the E3 platform, everything's legible. Like, so it's high flash tank pressure one. Like there's a lot of words, so I really understand what I'm putting in compared to the E2 before, where you really need to understand what it was you were putting it in for. So I like that a lot.
Yeah, the E2 had a limited characters in some applications, but here it's yeah, we can have quite a bit of text, and so you can get a good custom message in there. It's I would like to say it's kind of straightforward on how to set it up. Like set up your value. In this case, it tells you what your range can be, and then the glorified time delay. After our time delay, you have your deadband for around your trip point. So it's pretty user friendly. Same goes for various other alarms throughout this application. Otherwise, we also have, in this case, this would just, where do you want your alarm outputs to go? In this case, you set up to a board and point or another application. For some reason, I am out of focus.
Yeah, just put your hand. Yeah, not sure why. Let's not worry about that.
Yeah, I'll get back
They
to
can
it
see.
after.
They can see the demo.
Perfect. The alarm tab, which is even on the E2, there's going to be some lines on here that folks will recognize. Your typical rack fail, phase alarm, critical, non-critical, however you want to set it up. Obviously, rack fail, phase loss is quite critical. Compressor proofs, what do you want to set them up to? Compressor oil, et cetera, et cetera. Otherwise, it gives a nice summary of what else is going on. Another thing that's nice for the E3 is you're not just limited to the default screens right out of the box. We have like this various other screens that you can have out of the box. Like it's again, if this was a giant rack, this would be a quick summary of the whole system at a glance.
Oh, nice.
Being you can have all your circuits, and this is all customizable. You can pick and choose what you'd like to do: sensor applications, condenser applications, suction groups, you name it. Kind of do whatever you want on it. Change the various sizes. It's quite user friendly in that regards. Schedules are quite handy on how it's progressed since the E2 days. It's quite user friendly. It's just in this case, I just created two examples: lighting occupancy, and just an exhaust fan in some sort of kitchen. In this case, the green block's referring to that it's enabled or occupied. Create a new schedule. It's just simple, just add a new schedule, type in the name, whatever you want, test, save it.
And so, would you use this for like all your defrost circuits and stuff like that?
No, we can get into that shortly. This would be for schedules outside of any kind of circuits.
Okay.
Which, if you would have a BX or even a CX, lighting is quite a common application for these schedules, or various makeup air fans and whatnot for kitchens and
Cool. Yeah.
Let's go back to, and in our test one, let's say we want to add a new schedule. Yeah, let's call it test. We want to create something that's going to be on at 5, off at, I don't know, 10 o'clock at night, only on Mondays and Tuesdays. Save, and that's it.
So this would be like for parking lot lights, for example. I hear that.
Yeah, exactly. Parking lot lights, or if you have a store that's attached to a mall or something like that, it's usually lighting's the biggest one that's on it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the E3 and the site supervisor has as well. It has the ability for a few custom floor plans, or even rack pages and whatnot. In this case, here's an example of a floor plan. Nothing crazy. This was kind of modified from a customer that wanted a small format floor plan on their screen. They kind of went for just temperatures is all they were looking for. In this case, it worked exactly what they wanted to do. You can have the ability to click on cases, open up the counter, and you can open up either the circuit application, or if you want, you can dive into further into a custom screen.
So if you clicked on just say one of those, it would take you into the controller, like if it's a CC200 or an XM678, 679. Is that what, at that point, could you do that? Like go right into the controller data of that case?
Yeah, exactly. Like if they would be like system one, if it'd be an XM case controller or a CC200 or even a standard circuit, it would load up that application.
Okay, awesome.
Here's another option. This customer wanted some sort of rack diagram. They wanted as much visual assistance for where this equipment was going. And in this case, it's A little more than the E2 ultrasight days. We just have little spinning fans with condenser fan outputs. That's all we're looking at there. On our compressors, we have the compressors are animated, and in this case, you can imagine if we have compressor proofs. So if the compressor input equals on, all it's really doing is enabling the GIF animation of the compressor. And if there were one that'd be an alarm, it would change it to red. It's nothing extraordinary, but it helps the troubleshooting side. You can potentially, at a quick glance, get a visual and get to the root cause potentially quicker.
Yeah, and so this is all customizable because you could even do this on Ultrasight back in the day, but Ultrasight was a lot more work. Now everything's web-based compared to what it was, because I know lots of technicians who worked on E3, Ultrasight was the go-to. They didn't even like working on the controller. But now it's all on a web-based platform where it's easier access. I'm assuming that these diagrams can be customized, but do you provide like all these, like the compressors and all that stuff when they're building this? All this is in the platform, like the
In
piping?
this case, these excuse me, these screens were created by us and our Canada group.
Okay.
The customer just requested a rough sketch, and then I proposed a couple ideas to them. You can see some of these graphics we have similarities to some Emerson marketing material.
Yeah.
Um, Out of the box, we don't really have any graphics available out of the box, but that's
Okay.
not really stopping anybody from potentially getting a compressor graphic. And essentially, if you have a static image and if you want it to be animated, you just have a GIF represented by an input. So being animated fan, a rooftop fan, if you have a board and a rooftop application and you want to see the supply return, the fans, typical stuff that you would see more often in the kind of HVAC BAS world.
Okay.
Those kind of graphics and whatnot, there's no reason why you couldn't use that library if you have that library available to you.
So a control guy who's doing the setup can actually, if they want, they can do the design themselves on what their customer is looking for. Is that correct?
Currently, you have to do it through Site Manager, which is through our
Okay.
Connect Plus.
Okay.
Eventually, it's going to evolve past that, but it's even for offline programming. In our E2 days, we would do so with Ultrasight.
Yeah.
Offline programming now, I don't know if right, and you can see in kind of my taskbar here, it's done through a link.
Okay.
You have to register for it. It's available to those that do not use kind of like a free email address. Like if you have Yahoo or Hotmail, you probably won't be able to register for it. If you register with your company name probably in the back, send in to register your application and get approved, and then you'll have access to program.
Yeah.
And that's handy. It's because obviously working on a PC is always quicker than touching being an E2 or the E3 on the actual screen itself. You can do it on your PC through the offline programming, save it on a USB stick, load up the stick, or if it's on your network, you can drop it in that way too.
Yeah. Awesome. What else kind of cool features that the E3 has? Because I really like having the graphics on there. I used to always like to go to the Ultrasight, especially when I remember working on the CO2 trainer when I was at Emerson, and we had it on Ultrasight, and Peter Season built the layout, the picture for it. Was awesome because you could see everything. You could see all the pressures, all the temperatures. When it was in transcritical, subcritical, it would come up, and you would know everything that was going on in the system for that trainer, and that made the difference, especially when you're teaching. But when you're troubleshooting it, we could just sit there and we can look as the ambient temperature would go up. The iPro would kick into, say, transcritical algorithm and start to run that way. But you'd see it all on there, how it was working. And then I'm assuming you can do 10 times more with this program.
yeah, excuse me. Yeah, you can essentially you can come up with whatever you desire. Essentially, it's the canvas where you create the screen is high resolution. It's just essentially you're limited to just the resolution of your PC. But yeah, like in this case, the example that I have, like they're fairly large just to kind of have a decent display on the PC. And even on the E3 itself, that's how it shows up. It's clear. You can read all the font. You can even see whatever, if you have animations show up on the actual screen itself.
Awesome. How many, do you know how many E3s are running as CO2 systems at this point? Are there
There
some?
are, yeah, there are a bunch. There are
Okay.
a bunch throughout North America. I can
I don't need
definitely.
a number. I just wanted to make sure that because I knew there some people told me they're already using some E3s on CO2 applications. I just wanted to know because there's more and it's continuing to grow. And as the E3s start to come out, you're going to see more and more of them. Because the technicians that I've been talking to, they're really liking the E3 because it's just more user friendly. When they get to know it, it's very easy to function around. You don't have to be a scientist to read what each thing is because it depends on who programmed E2 would be and how much information they put in would be what the next tech got. But in the E3, it's a lot more plain English. That's what I've been told.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's the E3. Like once you warm up to the home page and the tiles, it gets comfortable from there. Like it kind of has the nice layout to it. There, you don't have to search for a configured application and see what your control guide developed through a flex combiner. Yes, we still have flex combiners in here, but we can rename them properly or change them in different subcategories as well. Like it's like any time for a site supervisor or a E3, I would recommend to everybody to kind of sort through the tiles on the main page to kind of categorize them to just make it easier to navigate. Like in this case, like we have our main refrigeration category. You drop down that menu, here's generic components of suction pressure or suction control and the iPro, and then go down the next subcategories, case controller circuits, another category, standard circuits. So like if you I guess a quick little tip on that, if you want to move them around, we just hit the edit button at the top, uh, assuming your login credentials are there. And it's an easy matter of just slide it around, put it wherever you want. Being if you have it on a PC, do it with a mouse, or on the E3 on the touch screen, you're keeping your finger on it, dragging it around. At the end, you're just hitting save,
Yeah,
going back
awesome.
to view, and it's just kind of it. If you can make navigating any PLC for that matter, more efficient. If you know where to go, you know how to get there efficiently, it's going to make your entire experience with the controller better.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree with that because when you feel comfortable with what you're using, it's gonna make any if you're set, it can set it up, figure it out how. Because a lot of times you're working at that store, there's not always 100 different technicians. Usually you're in a town or a city where you got so many stores that you will be hitting, and then if you set it up, or if you're running your own store, which is even better, you set it up to the way you can go in and troubleshoot the easiest, or somebody else comes in that will understand how to use it most effectively, like alarms and things like that. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
just super cool.
yeah, like it's another benefit that I like out of it. Let's say if you have your rack mechanical room with your rack in it that has an E3, and if you would have a PC in a manager's office. In the past, we required UltraSite. Now it can be a PC with a browser, connect to the static IP address of the E3. Mind you, you probably have an IT department for the grocery store to coordinate with regarding the details and VPNs and securities and all that stuff. But let's say if you wouldn't have those headaches, um, I connect right to it in a browser like any other bookmark, login, no
Yeah.
special software needed.
That is awesome. So the functionality is a lot better for sure on the E3. And then there's more platforms coming out. I see that you have iPro CO2. Why don't you talk a little bit about that? Because I know when I was at Emerson, they were still developing the iPro. It was on the trainer, and there was still a lot of work to do. But I was actually listening to a podcast today with the Advanced Refrigeration Podcast guys, and Kevin said that he's been working on three iPros lately, and he says it's totally different. It seems that it's a lot better, easier functionality. It's controlling a lot better. Can you talk to anything on that line on how the redevelopment of the iPro is going and the solutions coming out?
Yeah, it's the iPro. It has definitely taken a spike in popularity for CO2 applications. Um, there's been some hardware changes in the background. Software changes. I can just go over over the application a little bit, and maybe we can revisit that in a little more detail
Yeah,
in a future episode. Um, Otherwise, the application itself, I don't have any true inputs to look at here, so it's a
that's
little
okay.
tricky to make sense of what we're looking at, aside from various values saying none and whatnot. But
That's okay.
it's we still have both valves, temperature output, temperature set point of the gas cooler, and whatnot. Um, but yeah, I would prefer a
What?
deeper dive at a later time
Yeah,
if
yeah.
that because it's a heavy topic.
Yeah, but just looking at this screen for anyone who's listening, there's one, two, three, four, five graphs on it of different points, which makes a huge difference when you're troubleshooting. Like when you can see more graphs, you can see different pressures and different temperatures from all over the system. It makes troubleshooting so much easier because it could be something on the opposite side of the system that is affecting another component. It could be a metering, so an electronic expansion valve in a case that is causing the bypass valve to act up or the high pressure valve to act up. So it's so convenient to be able to see, for me anyway, to see more graphs.
Yes, absolutely. Like another feature as well is the actual tile points in the menu on the left. And this doesn't just go for the iPro, go for any application. This can be user specific. You can pick and choose what points you want to see in that box. So let's say for whatever reason, if you don't want to see the valve one output for whatever reason, you can shuffle the order, you can move it to the top. So you can really have a tailored layout for what you would want your points to look at.
Yeah.
Rather.
And that's awesome because that for me as a technician out there troubleshooting, I need to see all the points. It makes so many things so much easier. So I got a question here. They would like to know how the security issue is, that is, how to access the store and how to show the customer that the system is safe and secure. So this is like every platform is, people are concerned about security today because there's a lot of data out there today. What's the security on the E3 with your customers, and what do you recommend?
Uh it's it's hard to recommend anything there because that's usually up to a third party to
Mm,
determine the securities required. I've seen contractors use Toshi, I think it was Toshi box,
mhm.
which or even cellular modems as well. Um, larger organizations, the IT department will have VPN securities and all that set up. But yeah, typically that's done by third party IT departments.
Okay, makes sense.
It's available to set. You can set up whatever ports. You can enable the port, or if the IT department gives you a port to have access to, we can in the E3 you can manually configure which port it's set up at. So from a security point of view, if you're the control or startup guy, or just anybody working on the E3 dealing with your IT department, typically you deal with your IT department, your customer's IT department regarding what's the IP going to be, what port are we allowed to go through, and then they will dictate all that information with you or to you. Same with if you're using the email out alarms, they will give you that data, being SMTP, IPOP or POP3. I forget which one that is off the top of my head. But yeah, they dictate that info to you. You input it into the E3, do a test, they confirm it was received, and then you're off to the races.
Awesome. I got a quick question. You got the iPro out here, and I know we're going to dive into it deeper in another session. Does the parameters match up with the manual? Because I've been asking a lot of manufacturers this. Do you know? So like the iPro manual with the parameters. So you go to general, you go to HPV parameters. Do they match up with the manual?
Out of the box, yeah. Like this one, I created this application and it hasn't been modified. Like OEMs could obviously tweak their iPro settings depending on their application.
Okay.
Because obviously you'll have different valves, different rack capacities and whatnot. So it's out of the box,
Yeah.
probably will match, but once in real world application, excuse me, it may not match.
Okay, cool. I'm excited to talk about that in depth on another episode because there's so much to learn about the high pressure valve and the bypass valve from the different manufacturers and how it's done because there's unique algorithms built in. And I know even over the years, iPro was continuing to develop them with the different programs, isographs and all this to really have the best like COP, the best functionality, the best efficiency for that system depending on the ambient and the time of year, right? Things like that. So
yeah, exactly. Like if we can, if in the system, if these parameters can be flatlined and less deviations as possible, then your entire system will reflect on that.
yeah, I love that. So what else can you show us that the E3 can do? Because I also seen on there before the iPro was the CC200, and when I was just departing Emerson, there was more and more talk about the CC200. I seen the manuals, I seen it a few of the test applications that it was in. Like, do you want to talk a little bit about that and where that's headed?
Yeah, CC200 case controller. It's a nerd comment for a little bit. It's kind of, I like the name of it because if you roll back a little bit to the old case controller we had in the RMCC days, it was called a CC100. But in this case, the CC200, you have a couple different components to it. So you would typically have start off with the main controller. You have the option to add 2 expansion modules to it as well. So imagine the components are sitting on a piece of DIN rail and they're just modular, they just slap together. Also on there, you'll have a power supply. Power supply options, there are 2 that we have. I don't remember the wattages off the top of my head, but the larger of the 2 power supplies would be if you would have an application that would have 2 expansion modules. Now for the expansion modules, they can control EEVs. So you could potentially have main controller and 2 expansion modules with the in that case you can control 3 EEVs. In that application you also have the ability as well to control electronic EPR if that application permits. And
so for an example, if you have 2 coils in the case and you have and you need to, it's on the low temp and you need a CPR or whatever, and in there you could do it with that one controller, for example.
Yeah, exactly. So you can
Awesome.
you can have the EEV if you would want to look after the superheat and have the electronic EPR look after the suction pressure.
I think I said CPR, but I meant to say CDS.
Various inputs available for the CC200, your typical temperature, probe temp, supply temp, you know, typical probes that you'd be accustomed to. We also have analog CTs, where you can have them hooked up to, let's say, a defrost heater, so you can really proof the electric heat, the current going through the heaters. If you want, you can output that into a graph.
Does that come standard, or is that like an add-on like that there?
Like the feature?
Yeah, that feature where you would have a,
Yeah,
like
it's there. It would just be a matter of configuring it up. The actual component, yeah, you would have to
purchase that.
or a part number with it.
Yeah.
Um,
Because there's so many times I've seen it, I've talked to so many people where they go in and they change the heater, but it's not even the heater, it's the relay, you know what I mean, or it's something else, So it's a feature that may cost a little bit more money, but in the long run, it could save money potentially, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like in this application, that's kind of a canned out of the box before really configured. The defrost CT signal in this case, the CT is outputting 4 to 20 milliamps. Um, Various other settings we have, it's being if you wanted defrost CT enabled. So if you'd want defrost proof,
Yep.
Because I'm sure many techs out there have seen it where electric defrost and the heavy relay in the raceway burnt up, but the actual controller is calling for the defrost, and being if you can see that you didn't actually get to the defrost, you can get to the issue before it actually ices up the counter, hopefully.
Yeah, that's awesome. And for the people that are watching right now, there is a lot of parameters here. And some people are like, "Oh, there's too many parameters. It's frustrating." It takes time to learn this stuff. It doesn't happen overnight. There is a lot of parameters, but they're legible. You do need the manuals for any control system. Doesn't matter if it's HVAC, if it's refrigeration. These are control heavy components. So it's so important to read and understand each component and understand it. And look here, this is pretty cool. So you just go into question mark and it explains it. So you don't even need the manual per se when you're doing it through this. I still recommend reading the manual all the time.
100%. I'd recommend to anybody to read as much literature as possible. Have it on your phone if you're waiting for something. What's the harm in reading any kind of literature that can advance you in your career? If it's just 10-15 minutes a day, what's the harm, right?
Yeah, for sure. And what's good about this, I was just going through the old Danfoss 326A for the high pressure valves. And what I do, and I used to do this with Dixell, all Emerson stuff, come line by line, each one of these, go through them step by step until I understood each point. What does it actually do? Because sometimes this one point that Ryan's on, the fan type, it could affect three other points potentially, or three other parameters. So it's so important to understand exactly what that specific parameter does. So important. Love it.
Absolutely, and it's and like the question mark, the little help icon here, that's not unique to the CC200s. It'll be available, like you'll see many little help buttons throughout the E3, and well, a site supervisor as well. Like even up top, like it's the question mark at the top, the help menu. You can have various little terms you can throw in there, and after it'll spit out something on you. So like I'm not going to go through this, but
Yeah, wow. That's awesome.
It's pretty heavy in there. There's a lot of info there. The the literature is there. It's available for you in the actual controller itself, which is quite nice.
I love that. That's super important. I think that's the best feature right now. That's the best feature I've seen, because now there's no excuse on learning, right? It takes time. It's hard. We talk about this all the time, but you get into the CO2 controller, you don't understand what a parameter does. You hit the question mark, you read it. If you don't understand it, read it again. If you don't understand it, read it again. If you don't understand it, then ask somebody. And this is what's so important.
Absolutely right. And it's more literature the better. It's just you have to educate yourself, invest in yourself, and it'll pay off in the long run.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so there's a lot to this controller. So like it looks to me like that this is going to be the next gen of controllers for Emerson, the CC200. This is the platform that are going to try to move out, or are they going to
for case controllers? Yes,
for case controllers. Awesome.
It's mind you, there's more features in the CC200 than the XM lineup. So it's this one, the CC200 would probably cost wise be a little higher than the XM.
Okay.
But yeah, they're both do this similar task. Is just the CC200 offers more features to it.
Yeah. Do you does this also have a handheld, like at the case? Would there be, if you want it, have like a temperature, like something kind of like the XM, because you have was it 620, I think, little handheld.
So with the CC200, you can get a remote display, and the remote display is you can configure it to be Bluetooth to your phone. And on your phone, there is a Bluetooth app, um, which you can get access to pretty much all these points on your phone. So you can see, let's say if you're servicing whatever meat counter with the CC200, Bluetooth to it from your phone, you're right in front of the case, and then you can see some key points and uh, save yourself some up and down going up to the mechanic room or
Oh, huge for startup. Like that would be so amazing if I would be able to see I just set it up, okay, I'm setting superheats for all these ones and just see how's it running. You know, that's huge,
Yeah,
man.
exactly. And it's
Save
there's
10,000 kilometers walking.
yeah, exactly. And then you have to get your step count on your watch another way.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. And I see more and more manufacturers going that direction, more on the Bluetooth side, because it makes it so much easier, once again, for troubleshooting. You got to embrace these technologies and start learning. If you don't have Bluetooth gauges yet, you need to get that stuff, because we see from lots of different technicians that are out there, they're showing you that these Bluetooth gauges, you're on the roof, you can see what's going on inside, or vice versa. You're inside, you can see what's going on the roof. This is all done in the controller, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. And anytime you have any kind of Bluetooth gauges, being if you're the commissioning guy, it's you can have that CSV file. It's you can prove these are all the history of the startups. You can have all that data available to you. This is how the system was configured brand new, and you can keep that for history on the site.
Awesome. So I'm guessing you could probably do that for this as well. Like this is what's cool about all these new controllers, that you do a startup. Can you print off all these logs or save this file and send it back to the manufacturer and say, okay, here's the startup form?
Yeah, you can export
Awesome.
data to it, and it's yeah, make a library of it, PDF, and yeah, it's like saying it'd be comparable to like the graphs that we have throughout the site supervisor and the E3 being against CSV format, which for those that don't use it very often, that's something that you would use in Microsoft Excel.
Mm.
And Microsoft Excel, if you need to create a custom graph, do whatever you want with it from there. Otherwise, it would export PDF file.
Yeah, no, but that's huge, because this is so important as a technician. You're starting up a CO2 rack, or any rack, you need to have the proper startup form filled out. You need to know what you set all the parameters for. That's a good startup. If you're just winging it and you just get it up and running and you leave it there, that's when you get smashed compressors, you get broken stuff. It lasts for 6 months and things are breaking down. You need to make sure that from day one, somebody can see that, because mistakes do happen. If you do make a mistake and someone goes through the startup report and sees a parameter, wow, this parameter should be set at like 1450 psi, not 1250 psi. That's why your high pressure valve's closing, or whatever it is. It can help you out in the long run. So that's cool.
Absolutely. And another thing that I like about the CC200 quite a bit is the network protocol. It is BACnet.
Wow, that's different.
Yeah, we have IP and MSTP available.
Okay. And so why do you like that feature?
Especially BACnet IP speeds. And BACnet is just it's just something I'm a little more accustomed to in my life prior to Emerson. But yeah, it's the E3 has BACnet protocol built into it, MSTP as well as IP. In the future, there will be more and more IP and MSTP applications. It's not unheard of to have a third-party BACnet MST device, and it's communicating with the E3.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, no, I hear lots of good things about BACnet. Like, and it's been in, like you said, in the HVAC industry for years. It just is real. I hear it's real good. So that's pretty cool. That's really cool. So I'm sure we'll dive into the CT200 at some point. Anything else that you want to talk about on the E3 for the CO2 application? What else is coming?
There's some applications come down the pipeline, which the intention is to get away from the flex combiners. I'm sure anybody that's played with an E2 with the CO2 application, especially if you would have a hot gas application. If anybody would look at those flex combiners, they probably want to quickly look away from it. But yeah, the idea is to try and get away from all those flex combiners and have them in a canned application, being whatchamacallit, yeah, so hot gas defrost.
Yeah.
Drawing a blank right now.
That's okay. But flex combiners, for those who don't know, it's a special program built inside there. So it's like a programming line, and like A1 equals A2 plus A3 or whatever it is, and it has a result. But if,
Yeah, exactly. Glorified if statements, right? It's sorry, I was drawing a blank on ejectors. Ejectors is the idea down the road to have some more canned stuff on that. But yeah, flex combiners, a glorified way to think about it is if this, then that.
Yeah.
It's you can, and then you just have those variables replaced by various mathematical equations applied to inputs or outputs, and then you can essentially come up with whatever imagination you can come up with on the application.
But that was the thing, and the problem I've heard, like if someone wrote a flex combiner but it wasn't detailed about it, wasn't experienced on it, the next tech coming in could be chasing their tail for a huge amount of time, or to break that down is near impossible sometimes on some of the flex combiners I was told out there, because if you don't understand what they were trying to do, it could be a long process with a lot of different points trying to figure out exactly that. So that's cool.
Yeah, exactly, right. And especially being with the E3 and site supervisor having more characters. Anybody who ever makes flex combiners, I strongly recommend that you enter the description of the input. For anybody coming down the road and they look at that flex combiner, they can make heads or tails of what the application actually is. If you leave it just AI1, AO1, DI1, it's just going to make it really frustrating for someone down the road.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Well, I'm real excited to get into the iPro stuff and in our next conversation. Ryan, how can people reach out to you, reach out to Emerson, find out more about E3? Where do they go? What do they do?
E3, you can just find it on a website. You can just Emerson E3 will bring you to a link. If you have an E3 and you're looking for more information, if it's right in front of you, there's going to be a QR code behind the door. Give that a scan. It's going to bring you to the main E3 webpage, which is going to have various links for brochures, literature. For the US site, there's links for training, as well as the firmware. The latest firmwares for the E3 and site supervisors will be on that link as well. I can be found on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest place to find me. I'm usually wandering around on social media. I assist here and there. I've never really been a closed book, especially people that are just kind of getting into this trade. I like to help out as much as I can.
I love it. Ryan, thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you everyone for hanging out at CO2 Mondays again. And I will see you next week at the next CO2 Mondays. Thank you so much, Ryan. Thanks everyone.
Thanks for having me, Trevor.
Hey, I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you got something out of it, something that you can use in your daily life. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up button, hit the subscribe button, and click the bell button, because when you do click the bell button, it will notify you anytime new videos are released. Also, check out the Refrigeration Mentor webpage at refrigerationmentor.com, where I'll have all the different trainings, upcoming events, the different podcasts I've been on, as well as the Refrigeration Mentor podcast. If you want to check that out on Apple, Spotify, Google, any service provider of your choice. Super excited to see you at the next video. Now let's get a conversation going.